Boise State in the Community, which is a service learning class where my classmates and I have the opportunity to learn about the elements and fundamentals of television production. I'm your host tonight, Kelsey Rose, and joining me is a published co-author, a dedicated researcher, and an inspiring professor, Dr. Matt Isbell. Doctor, thank you for being here with us tonight.
Kelsey, thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for our conversation.
I'm very excited. Dr. Isbell, before we get too far, can you tell me a little bit about what drew you to your field of organizational communication?
You know, some students, they come into college and say, I don't know what I want to do, and they take their time searching for their path to figure it out. Other students, they come in and they know exactly what they want to do. I have a distinct memory of the first time I stumbled on organizational communication. I was in my second day as a freshman at Michigan State University.
Wow.
And I was flipping through the course catalog. I'm like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I got to see the C area, right? I got to communication and the course catalog. And I was reading down there and I was reading organizational communication, and it sounded like a great idea for me. So I said, you know, I'm going to try this. I took a class or two and I fell in love with it immediately. And for some people, they look and say, they test the waters, they try a couple different things. For me, I had a couple great professors early on that affected my life, and I never looked back. And so I've been in organizational communications since, I guess it was probably the second day of classes in August of my freshman year at Michigan State.
Fantastic. Did you know right away that you would want to go into teaching organizational communication as well?
I don't think I knew right away. That was more of a, when I was in the classroom and I saw what the fact that a teacher could have on the students, that's when I got interested in what it would look like to be a professor.
Right.
You know, my mom was a high school teacher, so maybe in many ways, teaching is in my blood in some weird, or at least in some weird way. But when I look at being a college professor, that really was the inspiration of the professors that were around me early on in my life. You know, if you think about college is one of these amazing atmospheres where the students coming in are, for most students, you know, we call them traditional students, but for our students that are coming in and for the first time in their life, they are on their own, or they're testing the waters of being an adult. And here I am testing the waters of being an adult. I'm 18 years old. You know, I can do whatever I want. I can go to bed whenever I want. I can stay out. I can just do all the things that we just, you know, take for granted for the rest of our lives, but it's new to me. And here I am thinking, what do I want to do? And we have these conversations in our head all the time. And then I saw these professors and I thought, this is amazing. This is what they do is amazing. And you know, if I could be so lucky to do that, you know, maybe that would be a great career path for me. And so it was really the inspiration of Dr. Steve McCornack, who was one of my very first mentors at Michigan State. Dr. Kelly Morrison, who was also a communication professor at Michigan State at the time. Both of them took me under their wings collectively and told me a lot about what it was like to be in this profession. And I did take some time off. And I always encourage my students when they're thinking about what they want to do in their career, and especially if they're thinking about graduate school or wanting to become a professor, it's good to see and know and think about what it is that you want to do.
Sure.
For me, so I took a little time off right after I finished my undergrad. Tried a couple other jobs, but I always felt a yearning to want to come back into this environment, come back into this place where I get to be surrounded by people like you who are experiencing some of the most amazing parts of being an adult for the first time, and really it's like engaging in those experiences. And that's it's like no other spot around here when you're on a campus. You're just surrounded by people that are really interested and creative and created to, you know, to do interesting things.
Right, awesome. Amazing. Doctor, you're highlighting atmospheres and environments a lot.
Sure.
And when I was lucky enough to meet you early last week, you had a very interesting office environment and a very meaningful space where everything has a purpose, per se.
Yeah.
Can you tell us why, or will you tell us why, you have only specific pictures on your walls? For example, there's a sheep, there's a jail, and I believe one more.
Yeah, there's a couple of pictures on my wall. Well, first, I mean, let's take a step back and think about what it means to have an office.
Okay.
You know, when you think about an office, what comes to mind initially? Maybe a sterile environment. Sometimes people think office and they think desk that you have to sit in front of if you're going to it. Sometimes we invoke this notion of the office and we relate it to like a doctor's office as well. And a lot of those environments don't necessarily encourage an engagement of a conversation, right? Sometimes we're even scared to go to an office. And so when I think about my office, I spend my work days there, so I want to be comfortable there. But when I think about my office, I also want the people who come to my office to feel a level of comfort so that if they want to engage with me, and if you think about some of the things that students or my colleagues and friends want to talk about when they come to an office, it's not necessarily, well, I should say it's important to me to have an environment where they feel comfortable wanting to have that conversation. So when you look at my office, and when you say it's interesting, it's not crazy, it's not wild, it's not like anything, but what I try to do is invoke a space where we have things that we can find to break the ice and things that we can encourage to have a conversation. So for instance, I almost always, in any office I've had, try to have at least some type of a couch there.
Of course. Sometimes
people just need a space to sit down and feel comfortable. I also try to, if I have if I'm lucky enough to have an office that's big enough, have a table there, and preferably a round table so that no one's at the head of that table. And these are just two different sitting spaces that I allow any of my guests in my office to decide where they want to be. What is the conversation of the day? Are you stressed out and you just need to sit down on a couch and just be in that space? Or do you want to sit down at the table, and are we engaging in some ideas?
Sure.
But you asked about the pictures around my office. First, most of the pictures that you see are pictures that either I took or one of my family members has taken.
Right.
But I chose the pictures that are on there because they all represent different type of working environments. And so when you mentioned a sheep, someone's like, this guy's got a picture of a sheep on his wall. Oddly enough, that is exactly the kind of reaction I want when you come in, because it's one of the pictures that almost always people sit down, they're like, what's with the sheep? And I look at them and I say, well, I usually say, well, that's a picture that my brother took in Ireland. But then I say, but it also represents what work looked like, because again, I teach organizational communication, what work looked like for the greater part of our history as humans. For the greater part of our history of humans, work was on a farm, either raising cattle or raising vegetables, or doing the things that we need to do in order to live as a society.
Right.
And so you have various different pictures, some from the Industrial Revolution, some that represent like you mentioned the prison system, which is a part of our society, and it's kind of a part of our society we don't engage with because that's where we send people away to.
Sure.
But it's also a very important part of who we are as a society. And so the pictures on the wall are just I look at them because they have all these cool memories for me. Like the prison you're talking about is the historic prison in downtown Dublin. But when I think about why they're on the wall, I have different images there that, in case you come and you don't know what that first thing you want to say is, or you're nervous about coming and talking about, maybe it's an assignment or a grade or just something you don't understand, because there's nothing that's worse than going to someone's office, because it's not your space, knowing that you need to be vulnerable, right? You have to potentially go in there and be like, I didn't get my assignment done, or I missed a deadline, or I don't understand what this is about. And that's a hard conversation to have. We're asking someone to have a conversation with a professor, right? I carry this, I'm a doctor of communication. And so I try to create an environment when they come in where if they don't know how to start, or if they don't know what to do, A, they have a couple options on where they want to sit. Mm-hmm. B, they have a couple of things to look at that can maybe break the ice in ways that don't have to be okay, how do I just barf all this information out to you? How do I start this, or how do I break their ice, or how do I become a little less nervous?
Right.
So that's a little bit about my office.
That's fantastic, Dr.
Then I'm a super minimalist, so I don't like books, and so it's mostly wall space and things like that.
Super minimalist, so you'd say your office is free of clutter.
My life, I try to keep free of clutter. Same with my inbox. I went to a colleague's office once, and I was in a meeting, and our screens are always up, and their screen was up with their Gmail in the background, and it said not just messages, just new messages that are unread. It was in the thousands, and I started to have a panic attack looking at their inbox. So, yeah, I try to, as much as possible, keep things clutter-free, because in many ways that's how I try to, that's how I can concentrate on the people around me. I think if I have a lot of things cluttering me, that sometimes it's harder for me to pay attention to what's going on. Same is true with my phone. So when I came in here, I wanted to make sure I had my phone away, because I don't want it ringing or going off while we're having this conversation. I try to focus on that. And the more I can kind of have that reduction of mental clutter, the more that I can engage with you. Because what's more important than engaging with you right now? Not a text message or a tweet or anything like that. It's having a conversation.
It's fantastic. And would you say that that lack of clutter and things within your space allows their ideas to flow more freely as well, and less distracting for also who's coming to visit you rather than just yourself?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I've ever asked. I've had some remarkably amazing conversations in my office. I don't know if I can like chalk that up to the space that I've created, or maybe the relationships that I've created with students over time. But I have had some really great conversations in that office, and just, meeting you for the first time when you came into my office. It was like I remember walking away thinking, I didn't even know what we were going to talk about, but man, I'm jazzed. I had a great conversation with you and your coworkers. And so if that's what that space does, then I can't imagine wanting to have a space any other way. And I really am. I'm not a fan of, and I get it, it's not for everyone. Some people like to have a desk and like to create a divide. And so when someone comes in, there's that divide. For me, that's never what I've been about. I like having a couch, and I like having a round table to sit there and to have different conversations and different experiences and learn from everyone.
Right. Dr. Isbell, we highly enjoyed our time in your space, and thank you for allowing us in to have that great conversation. We're going to take a short break, but before we come back, we'll introduce an interview from one of Dr. Isbell's former students and how he impacted her career, so please stay tuned.
My name is Brody Cavatayo from San Diego, California, and I play for the Boise State Hockey Club. I like build myself up, so I like build my confidence up, tell myself that like the other team is basically, they're not worth my time and I should be out there. The Boise State Hockey Club is awesome. I love the boys. The boys are super cool. The coaching staff and the booster club are awesome as well. I think we have a good chance. We move the puck really well. We do most of the little things right. We just got to tweaking up some of our aspects a little bit. I feel like we'll have a good turnout this year for sure.
Through his class and all that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Dr. Isbell saw potential in me and tried to bring it out, and I think he did. And I'm really glad he saw that in me and invested in me and challenged me to do better. And now I want to go to graduate school, and he's been really helpful in that process.
Wow. Thank you so much again, Diana.
No problem.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
You just heard Diana Costanzo, a former student of Dr. Isbell's. Dr. Isbell, what is it like as an educator knowing you have the opportunity to impact so many lives?
Jeez, you didn't tell me coming out of break you'd ask a hard question like that. I honestly say I don't really think about it that way. I don't, which sounds silly because right beforehand I talked about how a professor, before break, right? I talked about how a professor impacted my life in such an amazing way. For me, I guess I want to relate it more to even how I think about the office that I create. A classroom is a space. I'm lucky enough to be the architect of that space. I can create that space in any way I want, but it's the students who fill that space. It's always going to be the students that fill that space. I can teach the same, and I do. So I teach the same class, and I'll have a section in the morning, and then I'll have a section in the afternoon. And you would think I've got the same content, I've got the same ideas, I've got to teach this, fundamentally the same thing. But the classes are so remarkably different. And a lot of that is because the space that's created is always about the student's experience. And when I think about the impact that I try to have on students, I really think about the space that I create and hopefully the impact they want to have from the space that is there for them. So it's hard for me to think about the impact that I've had on a student's life because in many ways, college high school, but learning in general, it's a self-guided. You have to have that self-promotion. I can be there, I can tell you what to do, but unless you want to do it, it's not impactful for you. So
Right.
the impact that any one student might have or might attribute to a class that they take from me, it's really, I look at the student and say, you should be proud of it because this is what you wanted to get out of it. And
Right.
so, Diana was a student just like that. She took 3 of my classes, 3 different types of classes that I taught. And in each class, she really just embraced what that material was and tried to take out as much as possible, not because I wanted her to, or not necessarily because she wanted the the best grade that she could possibly get, but more so because I believe she wanted to be impacted and used her own self-efficacy to do that. And that to me is what's important, is that the students have the ability when they come into a class to really build on what it is that they want to learn and ultimately to become the person they want to become.
Right. And in one of your classes, the first time you ever taught the senior capstone class, is that correct, last spring, was a great example of letting the students take learning to the area they wanted to take it to. And so they've had a great relationship with the Women and Children's Alliance. Will you tell me about exactly what happened that month within your class?
Well, sure. I mean, we'd have to back up just a little bit. So it was an entire semester class, and one of the hardest things I think for me as a teacher, and probably for a lot of us as teachers, is after we create a space, like I was just talking about, for the students to learn, is to also let go of control. But the class that you're referring to, it's our senior capstone class in the communication department, and we're lucky enough as professors to have a lot of leeway in terms of how we teach it. So if you take a class from me, it might be completely different than if you took a class from another one of our professors.
Sure.
So when I took the reins of this class for the last semester, because I teach, one of my passion areas is nonprofit organizations. That's what I wanted to kind of create as the archetype for this class, the architecture of it. But when I came into the class, it was the first time that I had, for a long time, come into a class and said, I don't have an assignment for you. I have no final capstone for you. I want you to create it yourself. What I have is a community partner that really needs help. And the Women's and Children's Alliance, one of their core tenets is to reach as many people as possible with the services that they offer, right? And it's about finding safety, and then it's about finding healing, and it's about finding freedom for not just Boise, but the entire Treasure Valley and beyond as much as possible. And they noticed that their services weren't really reaching the Boise State community as much as they wanted it to. And so I was able to, and lucky enough, to partner with our service learning department here on campus to get a community partner with the WCA, who came into the class and said, Matt, we need to figure out how to engage the students more. And lucky enough in April, and lucky is not, you'll find out is the horribly wrong word for this, but fortuitous for this class, I just should say, is that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Right.
And so between having the Women and Children's Alliance as our community partner in the class and knowing that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I looked at my students and said, what do you want to do for a senior capstone that maybe can incorporate these two things? Because April is a perfect month to be doing your capstone, because obviously we finish at the end of April. And so the students, in conjunction with talking with the partner, not even really talking with me other than, saying, give me something to grade you upon, the students talked to the partner, talked amongst themselves, and came up with an entire month's worth of programming around this. Not just one event, not just 2 events, but weekly events. And so the WCA's mission has a lot to do with healing, kind of the progression of healing, that a victim has to go through. So healing into safety, into freedom. And so our students looked and said, listen, we've got 4 weeks here. So why don't we do the first week as it relates to healing and what victims have to go through when they need to heal, when it has to deal with sexual assault and domestic violence.
Sure.
And in the second week, we talked about, all right, what does safety mean? And in the third week, it's what does freedom mean? I think I actually flip-flopped it. I think it's about safety first, and then about once you're safe, then it's about healing. And then the third week, it was what does it mean to freedom? What does it mean to kind of break out of these things that have been hurting the victims? And so our students just kind of grappled onto that. And then we had this 4th week, and we're like, well, what is this 4th week going to do? Because they had just, the WCA just has those 3 words. And so they're like, oh, we should do, let's do community, but highlight the unity in community. And so the last week was a lot about this isn't just about safety and then healing and about freedom, but it's also about the fact that it takes a community in order for victims of these tragic tragic moments in their lives, to have faith that they can move on and trust that not everyone out there is going to treat them in such horrible ways. Yeah. And so that last week was not about focusing on kind of the horrid event, but rather all of the celebrations of the people that are there to encourage you, to enable you, and to be the person that you want to become. And so the final event, and so we had panels, and we did partnerships that showed movies, and we did a lot of tabling and awareness. They were the first group that I'm aware of that figured out how to light up the sub.
Right.
And so one of the previous universities I was at, on special events, we had a big tower on campus, and you could turn that tower a different color. Here, we thought, well, could we do that for the administration building, or what could we do? And some people from the sub said, I think we can turn the atrium a different color.
Right.
And so our group, our students kind of worked with them to figure out how to do that and what the process would be. And then all of a sudden, and I think it was about the third week, they were able to get all the lighting in. And all of a sudden, the sub was teal, which is the color of sexual assault awareness. And so there was this beautiful teal, like the glass atrium just shone in this in this awesome bathed in teal, and we had informational flyers up in the atrium of the sub talking about why it's there. And so then that's kind of happening a lot behind the scenes, and we were lucky enough to have some of our local news outlets pick it up as well. So all of this momentum is building, and it's all been generated by the students, and it kind of led into this final event, which they decided to do a chalk art festival, which, as you can imagine, if you're thinking about sexual assault, you're like, okay, how do I wrangle with this? But
right. It
was really much more about the freedom and the community part of it, and what it means to reemerge and to try to be the person you want to be again after experiencing such a difficult and traumatic part of your life. And for me, the great thing about this class, again, is that, sure, I'm teaching some content behind the scenes on what it means to be a nonprofit organization.
Right.
But every class, they're also working so hard because they are so committed to this project that they put together. And I told them, give me what it is that you want me to grade you on. So they gave me the grading rubrics. They gave me their deadlines. They gave me all the things that they wanted to get done and all the expectations that they wanted to meet. And if you can imagine this, and maybe it's harder to imagine for people that are watching this, but students, when you teach a 3-hour class, and so this class met at night, it met during the afternoon, it went from 4:30 to 7:30, one day a week. And for students, that can be a dreaded, 3 hours,
right.
It's the end of the
right.
day, it's kind of through dinner. I have never experienced a class where the students would be there at 4:30, and at 7:15, and we'd be wrapping up, and then they'd still be hanging out there doing work and wanting to talk with me. So there would be many nights where I wouldn't get home till 8 or 8:15, and I'd just look and say, that was what to me an amazing learning environment should be about, because I was learning just as much as they were going through it, right? Because as a senior and as their capstone and this is about showing off what they've learned as becoming a communication major, I was able to also take a back seat and say, wow, I'm learning from you all. I'm learning what it is that you want to teach to everyone, and I'm just
Absolutely.
as much a passenger in this adventure as everyone else.
Absolutely. How fantastic that you've created an environment where you learn also, and that students don't want to leave. I agree that I don't think we see that very often. Dr. Isbell, I believe we're going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we are going to emphasize why Dr. Isbell likes to create life environments versus learning environments. Stay tuned.
Moving onto campus my first year was a really, really big deal. It was the first time out of the house, first time living with so many people that I don't quite know. And so preparing for that, one of the first things I did was obviously look at the floor plan, see what I could fit into my room, what I should bring, what I should not bring. And then the next step was really money. So thinking about how I was going to pay for it, considering on-campus jobs, of which I've had a few, and it definitely helped in being able to pay rent and being able to live on campus and be a student effectively.
So
So one thing that was great for parents is just one, inclusive payment. We really enjoyed that, made it very easy. But as well, having someone here to help her out, having the support services was big for us. Knowing that there was resident advisors, resident directors, and also academic offerings for her at the residence hall was huge. Knowing that she'd be taken care of financially and as well as being very helpful to her to succeed at school.
Welcome back to Boise State in the Community. Before the break, we've asked Dr. Isbell about his senior capstone class and their involvement with the Women and Children's Alliance. And Dr. Isbell, one of the last things I want to ask you is something you highlighted in our first initial meeting, which is that it's very important to you as a professor to create life environments and not learning environments. And what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, I believe in teaching the whole student. And that's a concept that some people are familiar with and other people may not be. But it's the idea that I have to not only think about my practice in terms of teaching in a classroom, but everything that's involved with it. What are the policies that happen behind the scenes that affect, the student and the student environment? What are the ways in which we can engage with students in ways that they can feel safe, but also encouraged and challenged? And so for me, I try to think about what it is that I do in terms of a life environment as this is just a progression of everything that you're getting to and what you want to get to next. And so it's funny, the first college or the university, the first college I taught at, they had a mission that was to enlighten minds, to engage hearts, and to empower lives. And when I first got there, I thought, what an interesting mission for a university to have, because the first thing they talk about is enlightening the mind and engaging the heart. And I thought, well, this is not like anything I had ever experienced, because it was a small Catholic college. And I'd gone to state schools my entire life. I had, Michigan State, and, X, Y, and Z state school. I feel like I've gone to several of them. And then I found myself at this smaller private Catholic college for the first time teaching. And they looked at me and they said, this isn't just about teaching. They said that we need you to think more about what the student is experiencing, not just in your classroom, but in their dorm room, in the cafeteria, right, in between those moments. And so when I was there, I got to know the people that do student life very well, and they would look at me and say, you professors, you're funny. You get them for 3 hours a week and you think that you're changing their lives. Campus services, we have them for the other 21 hours. And that is also what college means to them. And it was a great moment for me. It's one of those moments where I had to say, wow, you're right, this is just as much a life space as anything else. And so right, when we talk about these different environments we create, I don't like to see them in isolation of everything else. If you come to a classroom and you think this is where I'm just going to get all this knowledge, and sometimes I don't even know what this class is about or why I have to take it, and then here we are saying, no, you need to take this class and this class and this right, class, then you're really not engaging with the student in terms of how they want to progress through and become the person that they want to become. And so I like to think about the classes that I create as ways for them to link together who they want to, at the end of their 2, 3, 4, 5, however many years they want to be here. Sure. What is it that I can do to make Kelsey be the person that she wants to become by engaging in those classroom environments? Absolutely.
Dr. Isbell, I've enjoyed our time here with you today. Thank you for sharing your insights on what it's like to create these life environments and these learning environments. I'm so happy I had this opportunity to talk with you. Thank you all for watching, but before we go, I want to give a special thanks to my director, Jake Harrington, my producer, Jake Harrington, my director, Megan Miles, the studio coordinator, Ray Mullins, and to you, the viewer. Stay classy, Boise.